Today's program is sponsored by ALP Limited Valuation Services. Most owners don't know what their business or their equipment is really worth until a lender, buyer, or partner asks. That's where we come in. ALP Limited Valuation Services provides small business valuations and certified machinery and equipment appraisals you can rely on for decisions that matter. Learn more at businessandassetvalues.com.
From Halifax to St. John's, this is the Atlantic Canada Business Report, focusing on the week in business news from across the Atlantic region. The people, projects, and policies shaping business across our region. I'm Peter McCulley. Canada's premiers and Prime Minister met in Ottawa last week and renewed pressure to dismantle internal trade barriers, calling freer movement of goods, labor, and credentials an economic necessity. Leaders emphasize procurement alignment, labor mobility, and reducing regulatory duplication to strengthen domestic supply chains. Business groups say internal trade reform could unlock faster growth, particularly for small and mid-sized Atlantic firms trying to scale nationally. The collaborative push reflects growing recognition that domestic market access remains a competitive drag. The International Monetary Fund says Canada could gain nearly 7% in real GDP, or $210 billion, by fully removing internal trade barriers between provinces and territories. The report estimates regulation-related barriers average the equivalent of a 9% tariff nationally, rising above 40% in service sectors like healthcare and education. Atlantic provinces would benefit significantly, with Prince Edward Island potentially seeing nearly 40 percentage points in real GDP per worker gains. Researchers say services account for 4/5 of potential gains, with barriers in finance, telecommunications, transportation, and professional services rippling through the economy. Atlantic Canada's housing crunch is receiving a productivity-focused response. The Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency announced federal support helping builders and trades adopt off-site and modular construction techniques aimed at speeding housing delivery. By reducing on-site labor demands and shortening build times, officials say the approach could address labor shortages and rising costs. Industry groups say innovation in residential construction could lower costs and shorten project timelines, though labor availability remains a key constraint across the region. New provincial sales data shows retail cannabis revenues continued climbing through late 2025, with Nova Scotia leading Atlantic Canada at $10.9 million, followed by Newfoundland and Labrador at $9.1 million, and New Brunswick at $7.8 million. Most Atlantic provinces saw a year-over-year increase, although New Brunswick experienced a slight decline. Price declines contributed to higher volumes. The growth trend reflects steady consumer demand and maturing retail markets. Rogers Communications expanded connectivity by including its Rogers satellite service in all 5G Plus plans across Atlantic Canada, enhancing rural and remote coverage. The deployment is significant for business continuity, logistics, and digital operations in those areas where traditional broadband has lagged. Improved connectivity enables cloud access, e-commerce growth, remote workforce engagement, and digital service delivery, narrowing regional digital divides and strengthening competitive conditions for Atlantic firms. Analysts view this move as a strategic boost for business digital resilience, supporting sectors from fisheries to tourism operators and smaller retailers. Nova Scotia emerged as Canada's most active market for corporate clean energy deals in 2025, overtaking Alberta for the first time, according to Business Renewables Centre Canada. Nova Scotia Power's Green Choice program, launched 2 years ago, allows large-scale electricity customers to access renewable power from local developments. In January 2025, the utility announced it had procured 262 megawatts of new wind capacity from projects co-owned by Mi'kmaq communities. The report calls Nova Scotia a model for corporate renewable energy procurement across Canada, as Alberta's renewables activity virtually disappeared amid policy uncertainty. The Nova Scotia government is urging the province's utility regulator to reject a proposed residential power rate increase, citing affordability concerns and ongoing reliability issues. While framed as consumer protection, the decision has significant implications for small and medium-sized businesses for whom electricity is a fixed operating cost. The province remains confident it can phase out coal-fired electricity by 2030 as new wind projects advance in Nova Scotia. Provincial officials say expanding renewable generation is critical to maintaining grid reliability and managing long-term power costs. Nova Scotia says it's improving nearly half of its permitting processes as part of a broader effort to reduce red tape for businesses and residents. The province argues that faster approvals will help projects move ahead more quickly, lowering costs and improving competitiveness. Officials frame permitting speed as essential economic infrastructure, particularly for housing and construction projects facing tight timelines and rising expenses. Nova Scotia's space and aerospace sector is gaining momentum, with Maritime Launch Services Spaceport Nova Scotia and federal investment fueling growth. The province is emerging as a hub for space technology and launch capacity, presenting global business and investment opportunities. Industry observers say the sector could diversify the provincial economy and create high-value jobs in engineering, manufacturing, and technology services. The development positions Nova Scotia as a potential player in commercial space operations, complementing the province's existing aerospace and defense capabilities. Premier Susan Holt says the province of New Brunswick plans economic transformation that may involve spending cuts alongside efforts on affordability and system reform to strengthen competitiveness. The Premier has asked all New Brunswick government departments to identify savings of 10 to 15% ahead of the 2026 budget in March. With the current provincial budget at $14.3 billion, a 10% reduction would exceed $1.4 billion. The Premier characterized the request as a robust efficiency review necessitated by current fiscal and economic conditions. A New Brunswick government release underscores provincial priorities for 2026, highlighting economic resilience, healthcare reform, workforce strategies, and growth direction. The announcement signals the province's focus on building competitive advantages while managing fiscal constraints. Officials emphasized the need for a coordinated approach across departments to support business growth and attract investment. After this word, Port St. John reports a 153% increase in Ontario export volumes. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, the housing market continued climbing in 2025 despite national cooling trends.
This segment is brought to you by ALP Limited Valuation Services. If you own a small business, understanding the value of your company and the value of your equipment is essential. We provide independent small business valuations and certified machinery and equipment appraisals to support buying, selling, financing, and strategic planning. Get clarity and confidence at businessandassetvalues.com.
Port St. John reports a 153% rise in Ontario export volumes, underscoring its growing role as a national trade gateway. The surge reflects strategic positioning as central Canadian exporters seek reliable alternative routes and improved interprovincial logistics. For the region, higher cargo volumes support jobs in marine services, rail, trucking, and industrial real estate. The trend positions the port as increasingly important to national supply chain resilience. The New Brunswick government has issued a Class 1 air quality approval for McCain's Foods' Florenceville-Bristol plant. Regulatory approvals of this kind provide operational certainty for one of the province's largest manufacturing employers. The renewal underscores the balance between industrial activity and environmental compliance, particularly in export-oriented agri-food sectors. McCain Foods remains a cornerstone employer in the region. Ottawa and Fredericton are investing $4.3 million over 4 years in dementia care training through Alzheimer's Society of New Brunswick. The funding supports workforce development in a sector facing persistent labor shortages. Stronger care systems also underpin broader economic productivity by supporting working families and employers. Officials say improved training infrastructure will enhance care quality while creating employment opportunities. Canada's data infrastructure ecosystem expanded in New Brunswick this week as Carrier Connect announced an agreement to acquire data center assets formerly owned by MSP Carbon 60 in St. John. The deal, valued at approximately $1.6 million cash, covers a facility with over 500 kilowatts of capacity across 3 data halls, serving more than 20 local customers. Carrier's CEO said the acquisition helps establish national footprint from British Columbia to Atlantic Canada. The New Brunswick government introduced ChatGNB, an artificial intelligence-powered website exclusively for government employees and primarily used for translating internal documents. The Department of Finance and Treasury Board piloted the program for 1 year before broader implementation. Officials emphasized the platform's enhanced privacy and security compared to commercial AI services. However, the Corporation of Translators raised concerns about quality control, recommending mandatory human review of all AI translations, particularly for legal and technical documents, in Canada's only official bilingual province. Prince Edward Island estimates personal income tax changes taking effect in 2026 will leave islanders with roughly $20 million more in disposable income. The province says higher basic personal amounts will help households manage rising costs. For businesses, increased consumer spending power could provide a modest boost, particularly in retail and services. The tax relief represents one of several affordability measures aimed at supporting household budgets during a period of elevated inflation and cost pressures. Prince Edward Island has introduced new regulations requiring personal service businesses such as salons and aesthetics operators to formally register with the province starting February. The move is intended to strengthen infection prevention and inspection standards, but it also formalizes oversight of a sector dominated by small and home-based businesses. Operators will need to meet documentation and compliance requirements, adding administrative steps but potentially boosting consumer confidence. The province says the changes reflect the growing role personal services play in the local economy. The University of Prince Edward Island was named one of Canada's best employers in 2026 by Forbes, ranking 47th among 300 Canadian employers. Forbes released the list on January 20th with UPEI and the government of Prince Edward Island representing the province's only 2 honorees. Newfoundland and Labrador is exploring potential locations to begin building ferries locally, a shift that could keep more procurement dollars and skilled workforce inside the province. The business case is industrial capacity. Even if part of the ferry replacement cycle can be built or assembled locally, it supports trades, fabrication, marine services, and supplier networks. It also reduces dependency on external shipyard schedules that can delay delivery and drive up costs. For coastal communities, ferry reliability is economic infrastructure, moving workers, goods, and tourism traffic. St. John's housing market continued climbing in 2025 despite national cooling trends, with the Canadian Real Estate Association reporting 9.6% price growth. With the Canadian Real Estate Association reporting 9.6% price growth from December 2024 to December 2025. The average sale price increase represents the highest 5-year growth for the capital city. A senior economist with the Canadian Real Estate Association attributed the hot market to moderate population growth since the COVID-19 pandemic had begun. Newfoundland and Labrador's real estate industry says its economic contribution in 2025 exceeded the combined output of the province's fishery and tourism sectors. The claim highlights the growing influence of housing activity on the broader economy. While critics note affordability pressures remain acute, the industry argues real estate has become a central economic driver. That's the week in business news from the Atlantic Canada Business Report. I'm Peter McCulley. Join us next time for more on the people, projects, and policies shaping business across our region.